What's up, YouTube? This is the 82 and 0 podcast. So, LeBron James. This is someone that people either hate him or love him. If you ask 10 people what they think of LeBron James, 5 people are going to hate him. 5 people will love him. But regardless if you hate or love him, he's an all-time great. We're going to look at him. So, James was born on December 30th, 1984 in Akron, Ohio. He was born to Gloria James. His mom was only 16 when she had him. Now his father, Anthony McKellen, he wasn't really around in LeBron's life, wasn't active. So LeBron grew up pretty poor. His family would often move around different apartment complexes while his mom would try to find steady work. She eventually wanted to give him a better life and allowed him to move in with Frank Walker, who was a local youth football coach. But he introduced LeBron to basketball at the age of 9. LeBron began playing AAU basketball, and he became the greatest, at least in recent times, probably ever, the greatest high school basketball sensation we've seen. He went to St. Vincent, which is a private Catholic school in Akron. The name of the team were the Irish. Now, this to show you how hyped up LeBron was, they were showing his high school games on ESPN. This is how heavily touted this guy was. And as a freshman, James averaged 21 points and 6 rebounds. The Fighting Irish went 27-0. And he had an amazing high school career. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Now, he declared for the 2003 draft. And you got to understand the 03 draft is considered to be one of the greatest drafts. You know, that and the 84 draft. But even though there were players before him that were drafted out of high school, you had Kobe Bryant, you had Kevin Garnett, even way back you had Moses Malone. There were still a lot of people that didn't think LeBron was going to make it. And even though he was drafted number 1 overall to the Cleveland Cavaliers, there were people on his team that didn't think he was going to make it. If you watch interviews, they're on YouTube. If you watch interviews with some of the players, I don't remember the guy's name. Somebody will probably correct me on it, but one of his teammates didn't even think LeBron would be the best player on the team, but he proved them wrong. And in his NBA debut, it was against the Sacramento Kings. And all eyes were on him. And although he didn't have as good of a rookie campaign as, like, say, a Jordan, he had a great rookie campaign. So in his first NBA game, he had 25 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, 4 steals. He shot 60% from the line, although they did lose to the Sacramento Kings. So on the 03-04 team in Cleveland, they didn't make the playoffs. LeBron's total averages for that year were 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.6 steals, and he shot 41% from the field. Now, the following season, the 04-05 season, this is when he started to become one of the best players in the league. They improved their record to 42-40. They didn't make the playoffs that year either. LeBron averaged 27.2 points, 7.4 rebounds, 7.2 assists, 2.2 steals, and he improved his shooting to 47% from the line. Also, he had 35% from 3. Going into the 05-06 season, this is when the Cavs started becoming, I don't want to say contenders, but compare it to like the Jordan Bulls in the late 80s. You knew that they were going to eventually break through, you just didn't know when. And so anyways, in 2006, they went 50 and 32. They lost in 7 games to the Pistons in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Now, LeBron, this is one of his best years. He put up 31.4 points per game, 7.0 rebounds, 6.6 assists, and he shot 48% from the line. But the next year is what stands out, the 06-07 season. LeBron would take them to 50 and 32. Now, when they get to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Detroit Pistons, the Pistons were one of the best teams in the NBA during this time. They won the championship in 2004. They went to the finals in 2005. Most people wouldn't have predicted LeBron to defeat the Pistons. But LeBron in I think it was game 6, if my memory serves me correctly, he just went off. He ended up scoring 48 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. This is one of his best moments of his career. And he just took over in that fourth quarter and in overtime. They make it to the finals where they're matched up against the San Antonio Spurs. And nobody thought the Cavs had a chance against the Spurs. And the Spurs swept them 4-0. But following that year, in the 07-08 season, the Cavs, they didn't quite do as good. They went 45 and 37, but they did take the Boston Celtics, who were the champions that year, to 7 games. So we knew the potential was there. LeBron put up 30 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. So it was pretty much a team led by LeBron. He didn't have much help in those early Cavs days. Now, going into the 2009 season, this is the peak of that first Cleveland Cavaliers stint. LeBron and the Cavs went 66 and 16, which I think is the Cavs' all-time record, best season. LeBron was 24 at this time, winning his first MVP. He averaged 28.4 points per game, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and he shot 48% from the field. Now, if you look at his team, they didn't have a lot of depth around him. Mo Williams was probably the second best player. He had Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Delonte West, Anderson Varejao. They weren't like a horrible team, but they weren't going to win anything. LeBron, his efficiency is what stood out. He had a 31.7 PER. He led the league in win shares. So it was a good defensive team. They made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Orlando Magic, where they lost in 6 games. Now, the thing is people remember at the time, Kobe Bryant was considered the best player in the league, and LeBron was considered the one coming for his throne. And there was a lot of commercials during the time. I'm sure a lot of people remember this, where they had like puppets. They had a Kobe Bryant puppet and a LeBron James puppet. They were hyping it up this finals. And this was supposed to be the year that Kobe and LeBron meet each other in the finals. It just didn't happen. Now, in 2009-2010 season, they went 61 and 21. They added Shaquille O'Neal to try to help him, but at this point, Shaquille was 37 years old. He wasn't contributing much. But LeBron won his second MVP, putting up 29.7 points per game, 8 assists, 7 rebounds, and shot 50% from the field. They lost in the Eastern Conference semifinals to Boston. Now, this Up until this point, LeBron was pretty well liked. Most people didn't have an issue with him. This is when the issue started. So in that offseason, in the 2010 offseason, he decided to sign with the Miami Heat, which had Dwayne Wade, and they signed Chris Bosh too. And these two guys were in his draft class. They were in the 03 draft class. The issue was they went on national TV celebrating winning before they even played a game. LeBron was telling everyone, we're going to win not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven, 8. He was claiming they're going to win 8 championships in a row. And this pissed the entire league off. Just the arrogance. And many fans in Cleveland burned his jerseys. This is when he became one of the most hated people in the world. So he's on the Miami Heat. His first year is the 2010-2011 season. He's got a prime Dwayne Wade, prime Chris Bosh. They didn't have a lot of depth yet on this Miami Heat team, as they do on some of their later teams. But anyways, the team goes 58-24. They're expected to win it all. First round, they beat the Sixers, no problem. Second round, they beat the Celtics, which LeBron always had problems getting over. And they go to the conference finals against the Chicago Bulls, who had the best record in the NBA that year. They had the MVP in Derrick Rose. The Heat beat them in 5. So it was looking like the Heat and LeBron James were going to get their ring. Now, they're matched up in the finals with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, one thing you got to remember is 5 years prior in 2006, Dwayne Wade led them to a championship against the Dallas Mavericks. This was a rematch. And I remember it. I know there's some revisionist history now where people are trying to say that Mavs team is a super team. It wasn't. Nobody counted this Mavs team to beat the Heat. And this was, unfortunately, one of LeBron's worst series. He only averaged 17 points per game. It was Dwayne Wade who carried the load, averaging 26 points. And there was actually a time where they had a 2-1 lead over them because the Heat won Game 1. They lost Game 2. They won Game 3. So they were up 2-1. But Dirk was on a mission for his ring. Dirk Nowitzki on the Mavs. And the Dallas Mavericks embarrassed the Miami Heat. And unfortunately to say, the whole world was pretty excited about this other than Miami Heat fans. They liked seeing the Heat get embarrassed, especially after their arrogance. Now, the next year, 2011-2012, it was a lockout season. So there was only 66 games played that year. And the Miami Heat went 46-20. This would be LeBron's third MVP. They went all the way to the finals again. But here's the funny thing. In the Eastern Conference semifinals, they were matched up with the Celtics again. And they went to 7 games. Now this would be one of LeBron James' greatest performances. In Game 6, he put up 45 points, leading them to victory. Because there was a point where the Celtics were up 3-2. So going into that Game 6, all the pressure was on LeBron. Because how embarrassing would it be in that Game 6 if the Celtics win? They would probably dismantle this Heat team. You know? They lost the year before in the finals, and now they lose to an old Celtics team. It wasn't happening. LeBron had 45 points. They beat them. Now they go to the finals. They're matched up with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the Thunder, they were a really young team. They hadn't reached their full potential yet. Kevin Durant was 23. Russell Westbrook was 23. And James Harden was 22. And OKC won Game 1. But that was it. Miami won all the other games, and in Game 5, they won 121 to 106 and ended it. LeBron had his first championship. So, for him, it was momentous. At this point, he's got finally a ring to add to his collection. He's got 3 MVPs at this point. But there's still a lot of people that don't like him. They don't like this super team era. Going into the next year, the 2012-2013 season, make it more controversial. They signed Ray Allen, who played on the Celtics. And this is going to come up in a minute. But this infuriated Kevin Garnett on the Celtics, which they didn't talk for many years after Ray Allen left the Celtics. So, Ray Allen's now on the Heat. They got a prime, at his absolute peak, LeBron James. And I know there's been stretches where LeBron is a horrible defender. And this wasn't the case in 2013. He did it all. This was his final MVP year, and he almost won Defensive Player of the Year. He came in second. He shot 56% from the field, 40% from 3, and he averaged 26 points, 7 assists, 8 rebounds. Dwayne Wade put up 21 points. Chris Bosh had 16. This was their best team. They had Ray Allen, like I said, Mike Miller, Rashard Lewis. This was their best team. They went 66-16. They had the second longest winning streak in NBA history that year. Now, in the Eastern Conference semifinals, they struggled against the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers pushed them to 7 games, although the Heat beat them. Now, the finals is what's interesting. Some people consider this one of the greatest finals of all time. The Spurs take Game 1. They're matched up against the San Antonio Spurs. Now, some people would consider this a rematch because if you remember, LeBron lost to the Spurs back in 2007. So now he's on the Heat and he's matched up against the Spurs. So Game 1, like I said, the Spurs take Game 1. The Heat win Game 2 in an absolute blowout, 103-84. But then the Spurs win Game 3 in an absolute blowout, 113-77. Not even fair. Game 4, the Heat take it 109-93. Game 5, the Spurs win 114-104. So you see, it's just going back and forth. Now, Game 6 is what people consider one of the greatest games. Now, going into the game, Spurs are up 3-2. And there's a good shot the Spurs are going to win this title. And going into the fourth quarter, the Spurs had a pretty comfortable lead there. I mean, nothing's said and done, but, if you're a San Antonio fan, you're thinking you're going to get your ring. And everything that can go wrong goes wrong for the Spurs. So going back into the game, there's about 2 minutes left. Manu Ginobili makes a 2-pointer, like a 2-point layup, 86-87. Dwayne Wade is fouled. He makes his 2 free throws. Tony Parker makes a 3-pointer, makes it 89-89. Tony Parker again makes a 2-pointer, 91-89. There's a foul on Ray Allen, drawn by Manu Ginobili. Manu Ginobili makes his 2 free throws. So at this point, the Spurs are up 93-89. Then everything, like I said, falls apart. Going ahead a little bit, they're up 94-89. This is where it starts to fall apart. And I think a lot of Spurs fans didn't realize this. There's 28 seconds left. Spurs are up 94-89. Now what happens is LeBron shoots a three-pointer, and it gets rebounded by Mike Miller. Then he passes it back out to LeBron. LeBron hits a three-pointer. That makes it 94-92. Spurs call timeout. They put Tim Duncan back in the game. And Mike Miller fouls Kawhi Leonard. Now this is where it falls apart even more. Kawhi Leonard misses the first free throw. And he makes his second free throw. But this is another mistake the Spurs make. They put Boris Diaw in the game for Tim Duncan. I think at the time, Coach Greg Popovich on the Spurs thought they had it in the bag. He didn't need to have Duncan in there. He wanted to rest him. But the problem is, LeBron shoots a three-pointer, and there's no Duncan to get that rebound. And Chris Bosh gets the offensive rebound. And I'm sure everybody remembers this. Passes it out to Ray Allen out in the corner there. Makes the three, ties the game. And at that point, there was like 5 seconds left. And everyone pretty much knew it was over for the Spurs at that point. The Spurs would lose in that overtime because that three put them in overtime. The Heat won 103-100. It was one of the most clutch shots in NBA history. And in Game 7, the Heat won it 95-88. So the Heat get their second title. Going into 2014, however, the Spurs, they were on a revenge mission. They did not take that lightly. So the story goes, they watched the footage every practice of that Ray Allen three. And the Spurs became the best team in the league at that point. And the Spurs went 62-20. The Heat went 54-28, however. The Spurs had a really good offensive and defensive team. They were sound on all cylinders. Kawhi Leonard was stepping up, becoming a star. Defensive Player of the Year. They go to the finals. And this is one of LeBron's most embarrassing NBA Finals loss. They match up against the Spurs. Game 1, the Spurs win 110-95. Game 2, the Heat win 98-96. Game 3, Spurs win 111-92. Game 4, Spurs win 107-86. Game 5, the Spurs win 104-87. And this is the largest margin of victory for a team in NBA history. LeBron is embarrassed. Spurs get their 5th title. And LeBron leaves Miami. He goes back to Cleveland. Now, in his absence of Cleveland, they had drafted Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is one of the best point guards of this generation. Very efficient. Not so much a playmaker, but he's not quite as good as Steph Curry. Curry's the best shooting point guard. But Kyrie is very efficient. So they rebuild this Cavs team. He goes back for the 2014-15 season. They trade for Kevin Love. And they go to the finals his first year back. They go 53-29. And this is this starts the emergence of the Golden State Warriors, who went 67-15 that year. So in the finals, Cleveland's kind of cursed because Kyrie goes out, Love goes out, but LeBron has one of his greatest finals performances of all time. Yes, they lost. The Warriors won it in 6, but you look at that game 1. Although the Warriors won 108-100, LeBron had 44 points. Game 2, LeBron had 39 points. Game 3, LeBron had 40 points. Game 5, LeBron had 40. Game 6, LeBron had 32. And if you look at his averages, LeBron averaged 35 points, 13 rebounds, 8 assists, and a steal. Yes, he didn't shoot the best from the line. That's partially why they gave Andre Iguodala the Finals MVP, because of his elite defense he played on LeBron. But he had one of the best Finals performances of his career, and he led both teams in every statistical category. He's the only player to do that. Now, going into the 2016 season, the Cavs go 57-25, but that's not looked at very highly because this is the same year the Golden State Warriors go 73-9, which is the all-time best record. And this is the year the Spurs went 67-15. So people weren't really afraid of the Cavs, you know. So going into the finals, Golden State Warriors take game 1, 104-89. Game 2, the Warriors take it 110-77. Game 3, the Cavs take it 120-90. Game 4, the Warriors take it 108-97. Now, this is where it gets interesting because they're up 3-1 at this point. The Warriors have a 3-1 lead in the series. And this is the only time in NBA history where a team has come back in the finals from a 3-1 deficit. Which, coincidentally enough, in the Western Conference Finals in the series before, the Warriors came back from being down 3-1. But this is the only time in the finals that that's happened. So, the next game, the Cavs win 112-97. Game after that, game 6, the Cavs take it 115-101. Now, go into game 7, and this is one of the greatest finals games of all time. The Cavs ultimately won it 93-89, but you got to watch the end of that game. There's a Kyrie Irving game-winning shot. And I don't mean game-winning like hits it with no time left. I mean, there's a good minute left, but they were tied 89 apiece. Kyrie hits the three-pointer, puts them up 92-89, and, you know, they're fouled, they make their free throws, they go up 93-89, and that's the end of the game. And it's one of the greatest finals performances of all time. And this is around the time, at least that I remember, where people started to say LeBron is the greatest player of all time. Even though Kyrie was the one that hit that clutch shot, they were contributing it to LeBron. So, the 2016-17 season, the following season, the Cavs don't do as well. They go 51-31. They're a great offensive team. They just don't have much defense. And they go back to the finals with the Warriors. And this is where it's not fair because the Warriors, who just went 73-9, they add Kevin Durant from the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they now have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant. This is one of the greatest teams of all time. So I think everyone knew that the Cavs didn't stand a chance. Even though this was a really good offensive team, the Cavs only won one game. And going into next year, the Cavs, there had been animosity growing with Kyrie Irving. He didn't feel he was getting all the recognition for that shot he made. And he decided he didn't want to play for Cleveland anymore. He demanded a trade. They trade him to Boston for Isaiah Thomas. And this Cavaliers team, they had a lot of talent on paper. I'm sure a lot of people remember this. But Early on in the season, they added Dwayne Wade, in the offseason. But then they traded him in the middle of the year because they weren't doing as well as they wanted. And they got a little younger. They added guys like Jordan Clarkson. And anyways, they go to the finals again. And this is one of LeBron's best finals run. He beats Boston in Game 7, has one of the greatest playoff runs in NBA history. In that Game 7, for example, he had 35 points. But going into the finals, obviously nobody expected Cleveland to win. They just wanted to know if they'd get a win. One win. But Game 1, LeBron scores 51 points. And they lost in overtime, and they eventually lost all 4 games. But the thing is, this is definitely one of LeBron's best years. He had an unbelievable playoff run. So nobody was faulting him for losing to this team. But he just knew he couldn't win anymore playing in Cleveland. So he goes to the Lakers. First year there, 2018-2019 season. Now I should mention, LeBron's career, he's been pretty durable. He hasn't had a lot of injuries. He's been, for the most part, relatively healthy. And going into this year, he's 34. He has some injuries. He plays 55 games only. They don't make the playoffs. And that let a lot of people down because the Lakers are so used to getting a star and winning it all. But the next year, as everyone knows, with the pandemic, the NBA shut down and they started what was called the Bubble League, which means there wasn't any fans or anything. They had an indoor bubble where the playoff teams lived. They lived there with their family. And they played there. There was no fans. I'm sure a lot of people remember this. The games were just a whole different atmosphere. Not taking anything away from this championship run, but there's a whole different atmosphere. And in that offseason, they got Anthony Davis, who one of the best players in the league. So once the NBA started up operations again in their bubble league in the 2019-20 season, they went 52-19 overall. They made it to the finals where they beat the Miami Heat in 6 games. And this was probably the latest, it is the latest finals. It was played in October because of the shutdown. But LeBron got his 4th ring with Anthony Davis. And Davis actually led that team in scoring. He averaged 26 points, but LeBron averaged 25, 7 and 10 assists because he was playing the point guard on that Lakers team. Now, the 2021 season, they went back to playing in their home arenas, but it was still a shortened season. The Lakers go 42-30. Unfortunately, though, this team wasn't very healthy for most of the season. They were the 7th seed, and they lose to the Phoenix Suns in the first round. And that's where we're at today, the 21-22 season. It's looking like they're not even going to make the playoffs. So that's where LeBron's at in his career. He hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. He's 36, but he's putting up 29 points per game, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. He's not showing any signs of slowing down. Even though his team is struggling, he's chasing the all-time scoring list. He's going to pass Karl Malone this year, potentially. And I think he's going to eventually pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the all-time scoring list. Now, looking at his career, just this far. He's an 18-time All-Star. He's a 4-time champion. And that's the thing that a lot of people critique him about is the losses. He's lost 6 finals, but I think there's something to be said in still making it to the finals. He's made it to the finals 10 times. Like I said, he's an 18-time All-Star, 4-time champion. He has 1 scoring title, 17-time All-NBA. He's a 6-time All-Defensive, 4-time Finals MVP, and an overall 4-time MVP. And he has an assist title. Now, where does he rank? Most people nowadays would rank him. A lot of people rank him as the greatest player of all time above Jordan. But most people have him in the 2 or 3 range. But hate him or love him, he's going to eventually be the all-time scoring leader. Hate him or love him, he's one of the greatest players of all time. LeBron James.